Welcome to the Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast, a show created to help painting company owners build a thriving painting business that does well over $1 million in annual revenue. I'm your host, Brandon Pierpont, founder of Painter Marketing Pros and creator of the popular PCA educational series, Learn, Do, Grow, Marketing for Painters. In each episode, I'll be sharing proven tips, strategies, and processes from leading experts in the industry on how they found success in their painting business. We will be interviewing owners of the most successful painting companies in North America and learning from their experiences. In this episode of the Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast, Sarah Ross, owner of 2 Freshcoat franchises, discusses her path to creating a multi-million-dollar painting company. We will be discussing Sarah's journey, advice she has for other owners looking to pass 7 or multi-7 figures, how she minimized hiccups while scaling, and much more. If you want to ask Sarah questions related to anything in this podcast series, you can do so in our exclusive Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast forum on Facebook. Just search for Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast forum on Facebook and request to join the group. Or type in the URL, facebook.com/groups/Painter Marketing Mastermind. Again, that URL is facebook.com/groups/Painter Marketing Mastermind. There you can ask Sarah questions directly by tagging her with your question so you can see how anything discussed here applies to your particular painting company. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.
Thanks for having me, Brandon.
Yeah, I am super pumped. I've been wanting to do this episode with you for some time, so I'm excited.
I'm super pumped, but a little nervous as well.
Yeah, you know, I've mentioned this before on the podcast. People say they're nervous, and to me, I'm always like, why would you be nervous? I do podcasts all the time. It's fine. And then I will sometimes go as a guest on another podcast and I'll show up, quite frankly, ill-prepared at times. I'm like, oh, it's fine. I do this every week. It doesn't matter. And then I realize it's a totally different ball of wax when you're on the other side.
Good. I'm glad you at least appreciate that.
I definitely do. Yeah, I can empathize with you. I kind of control the narrative here a little bit, right? So for me, it's relaxed, but for you, it's a little nervous. But fortunately, I haven't had any podcast guests at least openly hate me or the process yet. So I think you'll be all right.
Deal. I'm in good hands.
Yeah, you're in good hands. So I guess if we could get just a little bit of background on you professionally, when you started your painting company, what got you into painting, just so we can get a frame of reference here.
Sure. So my background is actually as a CPA, working in corporate America, doing accounting work, and just got burnt out doing that. Couldn't sit behind a desk anymore for 12, 14 hours a day. Wanted to be out in the public, dealing with people, seeing the sunrise some days, seeing the sunset. And so I really just went franchise shopping and came across Freshcoat, which is a painting franchise, and decided to go that route because it kind of fit a lot of needs. The price was right. I was able to get out into the public and be able to manage a process that I felt comfortable learning about and managing. So that's why I kind of went the painting route and bought into Freshcoat in 2013. And later bought a second territory with Freshcoat, and honestly have not looked back. I think I'd be bad at sitting at a desk all day long anymore. I love the flexibility that this provides, being able to still do some back office work and still have some time in front of the computer, but also be able to be out in the field and working with customers and networking and such.
Yeah, it's a super standard path. CPA, one of the most risk-averse jobs ever, to entrepreneur. A lot of people make that leap.
Yeah, we call ourselves recovering accountants.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's quite different. So you joined Freshcoat 2013. I'm a little bit biased toward Freshcoat. As you know, we work with a lot of franchisees. They're a very, very solid franchise. We've experienced quite a few, and Freshcoat's the best, quite frankly. You've been with them 2013. It obviously went well enough that you decided to open a second franchise. When did you do that?
We did that in 2018, and it was actually, kind of a benefit of being part of a franchise is that when other franchisees are looking to exit their business. And so we had a neighbor franchisee who was looking to exit his business. So I was able to purchase his territory. He had an amazing reputation, so that worked out really well for us, that we walked into an existing territory with some existing customers that we could kind of reactivate. And it just made sense at the time for us. We had started to scale. We still had room to scale in the territory that we were in, and the territory we're in was seeing significant growth with a lot of people moving to the Austin, Texas area. So it just made sense to buy the additional neighboring territory as he was ready to exit.
Yep. Yeah. Austin is quite the burgeoning market for painters. Also a competitive market though,
It
right?
is. It is. Yeah, there's definitely a wide range. There's other franchises in town that do great work as well. And then we have a lot of mom and pop shops. But I think that's everywhere. You run
Yeah.
into competition no matter what. So I can't say we're any different. But with the growth we've seen in the area, there's definitely been a growth in businesses as well, for sure.
Yeah. Somewhere between, depending on where you read it, 200,000, 300,000 painting companies in the US. So you probably got a couple competitors near you,
Agreed. A few.
regardless of where you're at. Yeah. So you started in 2013. I'd like to get uh, just kind of a sense of what that beginning process looked like for you. Kind of want to go through a little bit about how you started, when you knew that it was time to scale, how you scaled, right, without breaking the company, which is always a risk of scaling, and what your company looks like now.
Sure. Well, again, another benefit of being part of a franchise is that we receive coaching on that, right? So that's why I went the franchise route. I knew numbers. I knew I could handle the finances of a business and kind of the back office stuff, but I had no idea what to do from a marketing or sales standpoint. Certainly not a natural salesperson. So needed coaching on both marketing and sales. And that's where the franchise system really came into play and got us up and running and gave us a lot of coaching on how to go out and do grassroots networking and get your name known in the local area, right? That's ultimately what you have to do to start even getting quote opportunities in the door, right? So did a lot of grassroots networking up front. We still do quite a bit of that, but then obviously over the years we shifted a little bit more into digital as I realized how important that was to do, and that's part of why we now consider you an important partner as well.
Yep.
It's the different generation, right? And as we start to have those customers age into our customer base, we need to be found digitally to be able to get an opportunity to get out there and do those quotes. So that was kind of our initial startup, was really hitting the ground running with the grassroots networking, but then also rolling out digital as it made sense and as the budget allowed. Right, we had to get some money coming in the door to be able to reinvest some of that into the business and into digital marketing. And then as far as scaling, FreshCode also gives us guidance on that. We follow what we call the rule of threes. So the rule of threes stands for answer your phone within 3 rings, be able to go on a quote within 3 days, and be able to start a project within 3 weeks. So FreshCoat gave us coaching on how to go look for painters and how to answer your phone, whether we're using an answering service or not, all of that. And so that was pretty set as far as answer your phone within 3 rings. But be able to go on a quote within 3 days. I started out doing all the quoting, as do I think most entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the toughest things I think to trust somebody else with in your business is to go
And I
do
think
the
you
quoting.
should, especially with sales, I think you should start out in that role because you're
Yeah,
interfacing directly with the market.
good point. Yeah, it's your face on the
Yeah.
business. Yeah. Yeah, so, the concept of being able to go on a quote within 3 days, once I got to the point where I had enough quote requests coming in that I couldn't get to all of them within 3 days, that's when I really looked at hiring an estimator. And I was lucky enough at the time that I had a good relationship with several Sherwin-Williams folks and was able to steal somebody away from Sherwin-Williams. I don't shy away from saying that. They know I'm gonna poach their people if they get good people in our area. And I love Sherwin's idea too of promoting from within, right? So they do an amazing job at training their people on customer service, and so they make good salespeople most of the time too. So once we got to the point that I couldn't get to those quotes within 3 days, we were hiring our first estimator. We As far as laying that role out, we really had that person doing estimating and project managing to start. And then once that scaled big enough that we needed to split that up, I just offered to them, which do you like doing better, right? Do you like doing the sales better or the project management better? That particular salesperson liked sales better. So we moved them solely into sales and then promoted one of our lead painters to project manager. I love promoting from within too when at all possible. So that was kind of our first step at scaling other than, bringing on painters as we needed to. And so the other rule of three within FreshCoat's rule of threes is to be able to start a project within 3 weeks. So most customers just don't want to wait longer than that once they've decided to move forward with a painting project. So that's how we know when to bring on more painters. We can all kind of get in that comfort zone of I'm booked out a month, I'm booked out 2 months, I'm going to be able to keep my team busy. But if you're doing that, you're probably losing projects, right? So we try to, once we're out about 3 weeks on the schedule, to hire another crew, hire another painter, bring somebody else into the fold to be able to keep up with that workload. And that's worked out really well for us. It's, as we've talked about on your other podcasts and stuff, the economy has been odd the last couple of years. Post COVID, I think a lot of us took a boom and we were all trying to hire, and now it's slowed back down. So we haven't had to go through that process in a while, but I think it's going to kick back up here.
Yeah, there was a big rush for labor. Can't find enough painters, can't find the help. And now it's kind of flip-flop back to trying to get leads and get the leads to close. Right? Ebbs and flows.
Exactly. And it's a great time to build your list, right? I mean, we're getting calls from painters every day right now looking for work, and just keep building that list. Just like you network on the sales side, be networking within the painter industry to make a list of painters you can call on when the time comes.
100%. Yeah, and I think the leads problem and the problem of closing projects is an easier one to solve. It's harder to solve the labor problem, right? If people won't work or they're not there, you can't really materialize them. Leads are always going to be there. It just might be more competitive. And then you have the ability to get better.
True.
So one of the things you said that I love, because I think so often people are looking for the one silver bullet, right? It's like, oh, well, right now Facebook ads is what we do. Or, okay, actually SEO is working really well for me. Or, well, direct mail, I've always done direct mail and it works awesome. Or, well, I only do word of mouth, right? That's what the de facto is. If you're not actually doing anything, then that's how you grow your business, is through word of mouth. However, it's usually passive, usually not nearly as active as it could or should be. So I like the fact that you said, all right, I started with grassroots because you didn't have a lot of capital right in the beginning. You don't want to start throwing a bunch of money at marketing if you don't have a business yet. So I'm going to start with grassroots. Now we come into some money. The business is growing. It's doing well. We have a good reputation. We partnered with you, which has been great. We've been working together for, I think, coming up on a year and a half. It's been awesome seeing your growth and that partnership, but you haven't stopped the grassroots, right? So now you're doing the digital. That's where a lot of people make the mistake. Okay, now we're all digital. We have an agency. We're doing all this professional stuff. Whew, I don't have to worry about all that networking and the in-person events and going out in the home shows and any kind of door knocking. All that stuff just goes by the wayside. My problem's been outsourced to Painter Marketing Pros or XYZ agency or my internal marketing director, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. But you always want to maintain what I call multiple fishing lines in the water, right? Because things ebb and they flow, and one lead source might go up and the other lead source goes down, and that's how you build a more resilient company. So I applaud you for not dropping that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, you're spot on. And I would say it's not even just more lines in the water, it's different lures too, right?
Yeah, 100%.
You got to be
100%.
using different lures to try and catch different fish. And you and I have had this conversation about, me saying to you, I feel like I need to stay on top of it because at some point the Facebook ball could drop, right?
Yeah.
So if our
100%.
leads coming through you on Facebook slow down, I know we're looking at SEO stuff with you. I know we're looking at LSA stuff with you. There's other avenues still with you, but yeah, absolutely. I can't stop the grassroots networking. And honestly, it's another good chunk of our business. It's about 40% of our leads is through grassroots stuff. So I certainly don't want to slack on that, or the ball could drop and we could lose out a large percentage of our leads coming in. So yeah, you got to continue all those efforts, I think.
I think your point about the SEO too is really, really important. So the algorithms, like Google pay-per-click for painters, used to be phenomenal. We did a bunch of that. It was great. The cost per lead was good. The leads were highly interested. Now the Google pay-per-click, for anyone who's running that the right way, which is through search and not display, those leads are really expensive. So you need to have a high ticket value. You need to have a high close rate. You need to really have your sales process dialed in for that to make sense. but that's because the algorithm changes, right? Algorithm changes, competition changes. The paid ad sector in general is more susceptible to that. So you say Meta, we know we're doing a lot of Meta right now. Meta's going really well. The floor could drop out, and it's going to drop out a lot faster than it would in SEO because it's just the algorithm just doesn't update that quickly. SEO is
Right.
a long-term game. It takes a long time to build trust with Google.
Yeah. And obviously my background in accounting, I like to have control, right? I like to know what the plan is, where are we headed? And
Digital marketing, unfortunately, Google
yeah,
and Meta own that. I like to have
exactly.
control too.
As you've told me before, it can be a little bit of magic, right?
Yeah.
So it's something that at least with the networking, I still have control over my time. I can say I'm going to dedicate this time to attend this networking function or to network with realtors or to build this particular relationship. I have control of that. So yeah, I don't want to lose that control that I have on that piece of marketing. You got to keep doing it.
Yeah, what a good point. So you just will get banned from these platforms for no reason, no rhyme or reason. If you're listening and it hasn't happened to you, it may happen to you. It won't be, it'll feel like the end of the world to you. And if you're not prepared, it will actually be substantially harmful for you. But you're not the first person, you're not the last person. It's a pretty routine thing where Meta will just say, hey, you violated some pretend rule or you did something that you didn't actually do, and now you're banned. Or Google will come in and they'll just suspend your Google business profile. You appeal, you try to reinstate it, and then Google may just say, hey, no, your Google business profile is gone. You've got 250 reviews on there, and now it's gone. And now you get to start out. These are real risks that actually happen. So when you say that element of control, like you're building these relationships, Google can't come in and then just tell that realtor, hey, no, don't pass any business to Sarah anymore. Right. Or hey, don't this whole BNI network you've created, or all these past customers that you're keeping in touch with, right? That you have the repeat and referral. Google's not going to go automatically kill that. And so
Right.
the more you can maintain control as a business owner, the more resilient you can be.
Yeah, good point. And I would just encourage anyone that's getting messages like that to run those past you and make sure they're not fraudulent messages, that
Oh,
something has
yes.
actually been shut off, because there's a lot of
A lot
fraudulent
of
activity
fraud.
around that too.
A lot of fraud. Yeah. So one of the ways that we found to combat that is limiting the countries that can see.
Mm, good point.
When you start to limit the countries that can see the pages, then you start to get a lot fewer fraudulent messages. But yes, if you're listening and Meta has told you you violated it, you have 1 hour, to pay us $1 million. That's not actually what they say, but to click this link, do not click the link. It didn't happen. It's spam. We're just saying what could happen, but there's an abundance of spam out there right now. Phishing. They want you to click on the link. Okay, so the rule of threes, I think this is just good to go by in general. Answer the phone within 3 rings. We know that the majority of people don't answer the phone at all. So that would be a massive improvement. Get to the quote within 3 days. I think that's really good. More people are going to be able to do that than answer the phone somehow. And then 3 weeks, start the project. And I think your point of, well, we have this sense of security, right? We have some partners that work with us. They're like, oh, I'm so happy. Why? Well, I'm booked out 3 months. Well, that's
Right.
problematic. That's not, what are you happy about? Let's fix that, right?
Yeah.
It depends what kind of business you're trying to run.
Exactly. Maybe that is where you want to stay. And if
Yeah.
that's where you want to stay, fine. But if you want to scale your business, you've got to get out of that comfort zone a little bit of being booked out
Yeah.
and bring another crew on. I like to say I don't bring another crew on until I feel like I'm consistently keeping my existing crews busy, right? That is my main priority. So many of our folks, they live paycheck to paycheck, unfortunately. And I certainly don't want to put them at risk when they've worked for me for years already. So I'm not going to bring on another crew until I feel like I've got them consistently busy. And that 3-week mark really is a good indicator. And then when I bring on a new crew, I just tell them, my goal is to keep you busy full time, but it might ebb and flow. I'm going to communicate to you when I don't have something so that you can work on getting something else. It's definitely, communication is key there, but it's crazy how many times I've been able to bring on another crew, tell them that, and then before I know it, we're keeping them busy full time.
And so you are using primarily subcontractors, correct?
We have a combination of both.
Okay, combination of both. I think that's the ideal fit. I think you
I
should
agree.
have some W-2s.
I agree.
But yeah, subcontractors allows you the scalability a little bit more
Yeah,
easily,
exactly.
flexibility.
And then
Um,
you're not laying them off if
yeah.
you don't have enough work. It's just, hey, go find your own job for a couple weeks out and we'll get back to you.
I think your point too, though, about letting them know, because technically
Mhm.
you don't have to, right? They're a subcontractor, not employee. You're
Right.
contracting them for individual projects. You don't need to let them know anything. But you keeping them in the loop, saying, "Hey, I'm going to do my best to keep you busy. I will let you know if I'm seeing a gap, so you have the opportunity to go fill that gap." That's how you build loyalty and how you keep good subcontractor crews with you.
Agreed. And I think it's just respectful, right? I mean,
Yeah,
again, if they're living for the most part paycheck to paycheck, I don't want them to go without food on the table just because
yeah,
I didn't communicate that they need to go look for something for next week. You know,
yeah.
it's just respect, I think, most of the time.
And having a good enough handle on your own business to be able to communicate that, right? Because a lot of people just so,
Absolutely.
yeah, kind of up in the air with things.
Yeah. Time management is not only crucial as you scale on your calendar, but on your crew's calendar, on your team, and efficiently scheduling the team. And of course, hey Brandon, just this morning, truly 7 a.m. I got a phone call from a customer saying, "Don't send the crew at 9 o'clock today." And we were supposed to start a 130-hour project. I was going to keep one crew busy for the week, and she says, "Don't come." So you do have to adjust, and you have to be ready to move things around. That's, again, the accountant and the planner in me doesn't like that part of it, but you live and learn. You got to do it, right?
That's what you
So
pay for the sunrise. You wanted to see
yeah.
the sunrise.
Exactly. The more that I communicate with them up front what's happening, the more likely, yes, they're gonna stick with me through those. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry you can't go to the project today. The customer's had a family emergency. I'll pull something else up for tomorrow. Let me get on it. They know I'm gonna do my best at doing that for them. But yeah, you're right. Not only is time management crucial on your own calendar as an owner, it becomes even more crucial on your production calendar with your painters.
So I've been familiar with the fresh coat rule of threes for quite some time. I think it's great. I think it puts so many issues, right? Like setting an estimate quickly so you don't actually lose the ability to conduct that estimate because prospective lead is going to say, "I'm not going to wait that long."
Right.
Getting a project on the book, same idea, right? Because they're going to say, "I'm not okay. You can't do it for 2 months. That's fine. I'll just hire this other person." And then answering the phone for obvious reasons, because if you don't, you lose tons of money. So the rule of threes makes sense because it solves a lot of industry issues by putting it into a specific KPI, key performance indicator metric for which to track. What I don't think appreciated quite as much until right now was how it allowed you to really plan for the scale with the 3 week thing, right?
Mhm.
Because like Nick Slavik and a lot of people talk about um, estimating, right? And job costing and knowing how to actually build in your pricing to get the appropriate margin. So it's math, it makes sense. You just took what is typically not really viewed very mathematically, like, hey, how do I know when I should be hiring, when I can scale? Um, and you just made it math. You say, hey,
Yeah.
3 weeks out, like, and that maybe people listening, maybe it's not 3 weeks, maybe it's 4 weeks, maybe it's 2 weeks,
Right.
whatever it is. But now you have math. You know exactly when you need to be bringing on more crews.
Yeah. No, and again, I can't take credit, right? It was something that Fresh Coat
You
taught me,
created that.
but I
I'm just kidding. I'm
I
just kidding.
absolutely followed it, and it's been a key component of our success, and honestly forced me to get out of that comfort zone that I probably would have fallen into as well, right? Now, to your point, it may be 4 weeks for somebody else. Someone in the northern states, it might be a certain
True.
number in the winter months and a separate number in the summer months,
Yep.
right? Depending on their seasonality. So yeah, it's got to be defined for yourself and your business. But for us, the 3 week mark has been spot on.
Yeah. So you said you didn't create it, but you've certainly followed it. So that's one of the things that I've noticed about you. So again, we're working with a lot of like over 60 fresh coat franchisees. So we're
Fabulous.
we're we're quite familiar. I'm quite familiar with the franchisees and they're phenomenal. You are one of the top performers consistently for a reason. And in my opinion, that reason is execution. And that's one of the big things I see people going to events, people listening to this podcast, people reading books. And it's great to seek knowledge. But if you don't actually put pen to paper, rubber meets the road, you don't actually implement any of those things, then it doesn't really translate, right? And you're a phenomenal implementer,
I
integrator,
appreciate
whatever
you
else we
saying
call
that. It may take me 3 times hearing it before I actually implement it. But yeah, I'm going to take action when I see action needs to be taken. And honestly, that's part of how we ended up in the relationship with you, right? Our
Yeah.
Google leads had tailed off, and I needed to get digital leads coming in from somewhere. And I think I actually got a cold email from Painter Marketing Pros that
Oh
sent
yeah,
me that
nice.
direction. I believe so.
Yeah, we do a little marketing on our own
Yeah.
sometimes for ourselves. I talk a lot about marketing, so we should do so. So as you've scaled, you obviously within Freshcoat, but outside of Freshcoat as well, you go to a lot of events. I've seen you at PCA Women in Paint, PCA Expo. You go to all kinds of stuff. And then I know every webinar that I conduct, every kind of online event I'm on, you're there asking questions, constant learner. But what mistakes are you seeing? So other painting companies, maybe they're 500,000, maybe they're a million, and they're trying to scale, and they just keep stumbling. Are you seeing common mistakes?
I would say the most common mistake I see truly is on the time management side, both for yourself as the owner, but also for your team. Not scaling when you need to, and just leaving too much on your own plate, right? So to your point, and I don't make all the events. I'm glad it feels that way, but
To me,
you
it
know
feels
the
that way. You flatter me, I guess, but I appreciate
Maybe it'll bring my fees down with you. We should discuss that. No,
it.
I'm
You're
kidding.
always there.
The 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 way I'm able to do that is because I block the time on my calendar, and
Yeah.
sometimes I still miss things, right? Something else comes up and I don't make that particular webinar, but I'm able to do that because I have estimators in the field going and doing those quotes within 3 days. So it's not always me. And I try and effectively block my time to get it all done. Are there still some days that I'm working 12-hour days? You betcha, right? But that's because I wanted to attend that webinar, and I wanted to not multitask while I was on it so that I could actually pay attention and walk away with some action items out of it, right? So yeah, you really have to time block, and follow that as closely as you can. I think is especially at that $1 million mark. I mean, I think that was the hardest mark for me. And if I hadn't followed the rule of threes and scaled, I think I would have been stuck there, honestly. So yeah, for owners that are in that boat, definitely time manage, hire the right people. If they're not the right people, get rid of them quickly. I've definitely been in that boat too, held out, trying to train someone too long who maybe wasn't trainable, and had to cut ties and move on to the next one. So don't drag your feet when you feel like you don't have the right person on your team. It's
Yeah.
it's time to let them go on to something else and move on to another person that might be a better fit. So those are, I would say, the two biggest points. And yeah, just don't stop moving. Don't get too relaxed in any one avenue, like we talked about. Don't get too relaxed on the grassroots networking. Keep up all avenues that you can. And the more you hire, the more you're going to free up time on your plate to do that. Or maybe you are hiring a marketing person. I know that's kind of some of the CertaPro model, I believe, is to hire more marketing folks. If that's not your specialty, then hire it, right? You may be better off continuing on the sales side and letting somebody else do the internal grassroots networking marketing type stuff for you,
Yep. No, that's a great point. You can hire people to actually do some of that grassroots stuff.
right?
So the intentionality of time, I think, is a really big point there. I know I've actually struggled with this. I think it's easy as an entrepreneur, you're growing, you're doing all this stuff, and it starts to feel like the more stuff you do, the more productive you're being. And in the beginning, that's true because you have to hustle. But then
Yeah,
you reach this inflection point that I think is earlier than a lot of us realize, where you actually need to start thinking smarter, not just outwork everybody. Uh,
agreed.
there's a book that I'm reading. It's still quite honestly something I struggle with. Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time. And I think it's
I'll have to,
phenomenal. It talks about hiring. We hire with sort of an org chart in mind. That's the typical way of hiring, right? Like we need a certain position filled. And what he talks about is figure out where you're spending all your time and hire for that instead.
nice. I
Yeah.
like that approach. I'll have to see if I can get it in audio. Like I said to you when you handed me your book, if it's not audio, I'm probably not going to get to it, honestly.
Yeah. Oh,
But yeah, I'll have to check that one out on audio.
yeah, no, that would be great. And then like you said, some people are not trainable, right? So EOS, that's something that we've partially implemented. It's a long process, so we're working on full implementation. But entrepreneurial operating system, it is a good operating. I fought it for a long time just because it seemed like a fad, and I don't do fads. But then enough of my friends kind of beat me over the head with it that I decided to move forward, and it's been good. But they talk about people need to have get it, get it. So they have to get it, they have to want it, and they have the capacity to do it. So they might
Nice.
want it, but they might not have the capacity. They just
Yeah.
might not be the right. There are some people who want the job, and
Yeah.
maybe they understand the job. They just can't do it, or they want it and they can do it. They just can't wrap their minds around it. They just
Yeah.
can't, for whatever reason, understand what actually needs to happen here.
Or they just don't have the drive. You know, the drive is key
Everyone
too.
has our drive, Sarah. Everyone works like us.
And
There's
I'm not
nobody
saying my
lazy in the
drive is
world.
anything special. I think just some folks get into it and just don't realize that you do have to keep the wheels moving.
Yeah. Yeah, you're growing or you're dying.
Yep.
And then one of the things you had said, which I want to circle back to because I was a little confused. You talked about hiring someone who is an estimator and a project manager. Right?
Yes.
So they're doing them both. But I know as a lot of owners scale, they'll be doing the estimating and the project management themselves, and then
Mhm.
they'll hire for one or the other. If they
Yep.
like to sell, they'll do project management or vice versa. Are you saying that you would just hire for them both at the same time, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so we did. And I think, to each his own. If it makes sense for
Yeah.
you to just hire an estimator or just hire a project manager, by all means do that. For my first fresh coat territory, even though it was only one territory, it's geographically fairly large. So I would be driving up to an hour and 15 minutes from one quote to the other. So for me, it made sense to hire an individual that could do estimating and project management of what they estimated and put them in a particular geographical area of my territory. So neither one of us were spending as much time on the road. We were kind of more centralized with our estimating and project management. So that's why it worked for me, just because of the area I was trying to cover and the time spent on the road. It also, to me, just felt a little less scary, for a way of a better way to say it. I was still staying in tune with both roles. I was still doing sales and project management at the time. They were also doing sales and project management. So if it didn't work out with that particular individual, I hadn't stepped away from something. I could still step right back into it and just cover that area. So again, it worked out well. We only had to do it for about 6 months. And then we were at that point where I was asking him, which do you want to do, sales or project management? So it was a way for me to scale that I think just fit because of my territory, and also fit because it was less scary to me. But by all means, you can do either way.
That just shows there are multiple ways to scale because
Great.
that's not a common thing that you hear of, right? Like our service area is so big that I just continued to do both roles, but I hired somebody for another part of the service area. You almost never hear that. You hear either they cut off the estimating or the project management. So I think a lot of people listening, especially younger business owners or business owners that are kind of early on, sometimes the service area they say they have is a little bit excessive. Like you
Mm-hmm.
think like, well, if it's 50 miles, then all of a sudden my business will magically be bigger, which isn't really how it works. But if you have maybe a couple, like let's say you have two pockets, and they're kind of far away, and those two pockets are really good, that would be a super great strategy for how to scale.
Agreed. And if you have repeat business that then comes in from that's further out, you don't want to turn that down
Mhm.
either, right? Plus, it really allowed that individual to move from, that was when I hired away from Sherwin-Williams, right? Move from the I'm selling product to I'm on more of the service side, and buy him time to decide which he really liked, right? I mean, he had been in somewhat of a sales capacity with Sherwin-Williams, but in the store. Certainly wasn't a project manager capacity, but it bought him time to really see both sides, see all of what we did, and then decide what's the best fit for him. So I think it worked out well for him too, to have that window of learning both.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of a luxury when you're bringing someone from Sherwood because they're so familiar with the industry. do you feel like, because there's also an argument for hiring outside of the industry, right? And bringing and training them up fully on what you do. Do you
Yeah.
think it would have been more challenging, let's say if they weren't from Sherwin, if there was some other kind of background? Would that be too much?
Well, I mean, since then, I've hired folks just like you're saying that didn't have a background in the painting industry. They did go into a sales role right away. They did not do the sales and project management, and one of them was actually a sous chef was
Oh, that's
his
awesome.
past life, and he's my top producing salesperson now. You know, so
Because
he
he,
just
he
had the
cooks
right,
something when he shows
yeah,
up.
right. He just had the right personality. You know, he could get in there and really talk to customers, get them to open up about what they wanted. And it was just training him on how what he was looking at and how to put that quote together, which again, with a franchise system, you get more coaching on that. So it was a way for me to just get him into a sales position and train him on the industry. So yeah, I think both can work. I think again, I was a little more risk averse up front and wanted somebody that had industry experience. And then I was more comfortable down the road hiring somebody that didn't.
Yeah. And I think your processes improve over time. So your
Sure.
ability, the stronger your process, the less you have to rely on the inherent talent or experience of the individual coming on.
Agreed.
And then the other thing that you've talked about, which I think is really good, is this focus on personality, right? And the attitude. Like the sous chef obviously has absolutely nothing to do with painting, no background, no knowledge, no experience, but the right attitude, the right personality in sales especially, but the same could be said of project management or really any of the roles is so critical. Jason Phillips talks a lot about the DISC personality profile assessments. We started implementing those in our company. They've made a big difference. And I think it's sort of viewed as this fluff, right? Or this pretend thing, doesn't really matter. But when you actually start getting into it and realize, okay, if you can understand how people tick and how they think and what drives them, and how that might actually be a pretty big indicator of their success in a specific role, it definitely changes things.
Completely agree. And I'm grinning because we just went through the disc profile
Did
with our
you?
team literally weeks
It's
ago.
crazy.
It is crazy. And of course, you know, they were all spot on, but the estimator that I was just talking about, you know, what it brought out in the conversation after, you know, confirming where he sat on the disc profile was that he does a great job of building relationships. That's what he wants. He struggles when it comes to, okay, I'm here to do this quote. We've built up this great relationship. Now I have to slide over into business, right? And I've got to lay out some numbers for you. And that makes me uncomfortable that I'm your buddy. We've built this relationship. Now I got to talk business, right? So it gave us the insight to be able to say, well, how do we coach you on that transition, right? So
Yeah.
that you can slide into it and not feel like you just damaged the relationship you just built over the last 30 minutes.
Right. Right. Because now and it's that sort of aversion that a lot of people have to sales in general, right? It can
Agree.
feel sort of icky. Like, oh,
Yeah.
we've been friends, we've been talking about this stuff. So are you going to pay me money?
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of what, but I think one of the most effective mechanisms I've found for countering that, for coaching people up on it, is if you believe in your product, if you believe in the service that you offer, then you would be being not a friend. Let's say you now classify this potential customer as a friend. You would be being a pretty bad friend to not close them because there are so many, quite frankly, crappy companies out there, and that your friend is very likely to choose one of them if you don't help them make a better decision.
Agreed. And yeah, to your point, you know, we're almost always up against a couple other bids, usually lower than ours. And that's the point we want to get across to them too. Most people are going to be a little lower than us. If it's half our price, please be leery.
Run,
You
run,
know,
run,
just
run.
don't jump right into that relationship with that person. Really think it through because you're right. You even if they don't go with you, you don't want them to be taken advantage of.
Yeah. I want to dive into the grassroots marketing that you're
Mhm.
doing a little bit more in depth because I know there are
Sure.
so many different ways to skin that cat. And a
Mhm.
lot of people just do a poor job of maintaining it once they see some traction. So what are you still doing where you're seeing good returns?
So there's a handful of things we do. We're still involved in our chambers, but not as much anymore. Chambers were great at building the initial relationships with other professionals, so that we had some referral partners and such, but it wasn't a great generator of leads, right? So we stay involved in them, but we're not real active. The two that we're most active in are networking with realtors, which you can join associations in your area to get involved and in front of realtors, especially as hopefully that industry makes a comeback again. We rode that wave with it post COVID, and that was wonderful. We're hopefully going to ride that wave back up again. And then BNI, Business Networking International, obviously that's very chapter specific. I lucked into an amazing chapter right after launching my business, and they would have to kick me out of the chapter to get rid of me. Otherwise, I will never leave. I like to say that BNI kind of helped me feel vetted too. Early on in the business, honestly, I felt like a little bit of a fraud, right? Here I am, this accountant in my mind talking about
Imposter
painting
syndrome.
jobs. Exactly. I've heard you say it too. Yeah. And it just, at least with BNI, yes, I knew a roofer. I knew a plumber. I knew an electrician. I felt like if I was in a customer's home and they were asking for other things, I didn't feel as much like I was a fraud because I at least had these other professionals that are involved in the trades that I could refer. My chapter's been great. My first year in business, my BNI chapter generated 40% of my revenue. So
Wow.
from referrals. Yeah. So I'm pretty passionate about BNI, but I do get that it can be very chapter specific.
Sure.
If you've tried one and it didn't work out for you, I encourage you to see if there's any others in your area that don't have a painter. But yeah, those are the three main ones that we do: BNI, networking with realtors, and then the chambers. We do a little bit here and there with interior designers. They can be great. There's of course, with being part of a franchise, we network with our own. But then, like you said, getting involved in PCA and other painters that are partners with you are good to just network with too. I mean, we started a few years ago doing wallpaper application because it had made such a huge comeback, and the gentleman that we were referring it to kind of aged out of the market. So we got some education and started doing it. We've now decided we do not want to deal in peel and stick wallpaper. So I have another female painter in our area that we refer that to. So even networking with other painters can help you get leads when it's something that's a better fit for you or a better fit for them, and passing it.
Yeah, that abundance mindset. And I
Agreed.
think you mentioned BNI, right? Chapters specific, and there might already be a painter. You might be kind of boxed out of a BNI, but painters also leave, right? So people leave
True.
BNI. So if you go and you check out multiple BNIs, well, I guess that's not going to work for me. There's a painter in everyone. I can't join. Cool. Well, keep in touch with them. Follow up every few months. People go out of business. People leave. Whatever. Things happen. You'll be next up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or they may even step into a remodeler role, if they decide they're going to do more with their business, and then that painter seat comes open. So yeah, you're spot on. Don't give up on it just because it didn't work the first chapter you visited.
Yeah. And for everyone who's been listening for a long time, obviously there are a million different ways to skin this cat. We've talked with tons and tons and tons of successful painting company owners. So what works for Sarah may work for you. It may not work for you. You have to be flexible and try all different kinds of approaches.
Right. And we haven't gone the door knocking route. I've heard on some of the webinars I've been on that you've been on, it sounds like a really good approach in some areas. We have a lot of no soliciting neighborhoods in our area, gated communities where it's really just not allowed. But we still do yard signs where we can. Sometimes that's allowed, sometimes it's not. We still do our home and garden shows 3 times a year. There's events you can get out there and do that will certainly fill those opportunities. If you can do an event once a month, it's
Yep.
worth pursuing, even if it's a little neighborhood within the area you want to be in. Those little neighborhood trade show type gatherings can be very beneficial.
Right. Yeah. That's chess, not checkers. Right.
Yeah.
It's a small little show. Think, well, how many projects am I going to get? If you get one
Yes.
project and it's a neighborhood you want to be in, you can start doing door hangers or yard signs, you can start getting referral. You can do a phenomenal job. You could create tremendous amount of wealth for your business from that one little neighborhood specific trade show.
Yeah. There's one example I can give, and I wouldn't say it created tremendous wealth in this example, but first year in
Big picture
business, there
thinking.
was there was a little neighborhood show, and I even asked the chamber that was putting it on, will we be out of place as a trades industry? And they said, oh no, come on, set up a table. It's like $50, and I'm next to these people selling jellies and jams and birdhouses that they built, and I honestly felt so out of place. But truly, we got 3 leads from it, 1 job from it. It was a great project size wise for us at the time, and that couple continues to refer us. 10 years later, we'll get a call
That's awesome.
saying so and so referred us, and it was that $50 show. So yeah, you never know.
Yeah, and sometimes feeling out of place is great because it means you're the only company like that there. So you're much more likely to draw attention. You go to some of these big home shows and there's like a million different vendors. You don't really stand out. It's hard to stand out in something like that. I kind of a random question with real estate because it's just my own ignorance. I just found out something. I didn't know what wholesale. Do you know what wholesaling real estate is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea what it was. This has absolutely nothing to do with the podcast, but sometimes I like to go on just a totally random tangent. Yeah, there's we met a guy. My brother-in-law met a guy over the weekend who wholesales real estate, and I guess you lock in a contract. So you go like find typically off-market properties. It can be either residential or commercial. You lock in a contract and then you go and sell that contract. So you never actually buy the property.
Oh, wow.
So, and now ever since then, I've been just past couple of days listening to different podcasts and I feel like I keep hearing it. And maybe it's one of those things that it would just always go one ear out the other because I had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. But anyways, like I said, has absolutely nothing to do with this podcast, but you talked about realtors and just where my mind went.
You can't leave Painter Marketing Pros though. That's not.
No, yeah, no, I'm not. I wouldn't. Well, there's this whole ethical debate about, and I actually sat down, I thought about, so I used to work in private equity, and private equity, you buy companies. We did leverage buyout. So we leverage debt, but you buy a company and then you, on like the simplest terms, you make the company more valuable and then you sell it. So you flip companies. I found it fascinating because I got to learn a lot about business and operations and how to make companies valuable, but I also found it somewhat hollow because when you sell it, it's at the end of the day, it's a deal. It might be a deal that lasted a couple of years, but it's a deal and you take some money away and you have a little deal toy and you can show it off. But I sort of felt like I wasn't building anything. Yeah. And that's after spending multiple years improving companies. So I know if I were to sit there and flip houses or commercial building, that would be not something I would enjoy. And then you dive into, okay, why are you targeting off market properties? It's because they're not marketing. And a lot of times you're looking for people who don't actually understand the value of their property. And then you're going, and to me, it starts to feel like a pretty unethical, or I'm going to say ethically gray. Right. Yeah. I don't want to like be overly judgmental, but we'll call it a gray area that I would not want to build my wealth in.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, like I said, absolutely nothing to do with anything, Sarah. So maybe we'll like go through the edit and be like, okay, Brandon, was like drinking that morning or something. So maybe we'll just move that part out. But I don't know. When I listen to podcasts, sometimes I like hearing random stuff. So maybe people would do that. Cool. Sarah, what other thoughts, what other advice do you have? You've obviously had the opportunity to learn from a lot of coaches, to learn from other successful owners in your franchise. But anyone listening to this podcast, a lot of times they're involved in some sort of network as well, right? Whether it be Fresh Code or the PCA or any other number of groups. But what other advice do you have for painting company owners listening on what they should do to scale, right? To 7 figures, multiple 7 figures.
Yeah. It's just like you said earlier, don't be afraid to take action. So you're taking the time to attend these events and network with other painters and coaching. And although you hear something at that time and it may not be for you right then, it might be 3 months down the road. So file that away, whether it be in your notes, in your mind, but don't be afraid to bring those ideas back up when you think it's right in your business, and take the action when it's time for you to take the action. I'm lucky now with my team that they're very supportive. They want to see the company grow. And so even within the company, sometimes I'll bring up, hey, I'm thinking about this marketing idea or that idea or scaling in this way. What do you guys think? And get their take too. Don't obviously there's some things you need to keep close to the vest in your business, but there's also things you need to share with your team and get their feedback on, because they're the ones really out there driving it day to day too, right? So again, don't be afraid to take action when you need to take it. If it's not advice you're going to take right then, store it away because it might be a few months down the road, and get other input when you feel like it's something you need other people's feedback on.
Sure. Action trumps perfection. And that's something
Agreed.
that you've done a really good job of. So we use different softwares, right? We use our CRM with you. We have a whole thing built out and Go High Level. And CRMs and software, things have mistakes. They have glitches. Things happen. And so there have been incidents where maybe a message went out that it wasn't supposed to, or maybe it went out at the wrong time, right? This happens for everybody everywhere that uses technology.
Right.
There are various responses that we'll get. Some people, it's the end of the world. Oh my God, my business is ruined. This person got a message an hour early. It said, I'll be there in an hour, but it's actually 2 hours. Like the estimate shot, the business is shot. We got to close down. That's it.
Yeah.
It could be something worse, something quite frankly bad, right? Like they get a message at 4 a.m. or something crazy happens with the CRM. You're just like, hey guys, heads up, woke this person up. Don't want to do that again. Let's look into it. But this idea, when you take action, don't be afraid of mistakes, because as you take action, you will make mistakes, but you have to view the net. Is it net positive or net negative?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a concept I've heard. I know you've done stuff with Brandon Lewis too. It's something I hear Brandon Lewis say all the time too. And yeah, you just sometimes have to get the ball rolling. It may not be perfect yet, but you're going to work out the kinks as you go through it. And I think you've heard me say when we've talked about various topics like that is, I'm not saying the sky is falling. I'm just brainstorming what direction do I need to head, what's coming my way, and how am I going to handle it, right? So if you have the opportunity to think ahead on some of those things, just start thinking through the various scenarios and know what your plan would be for each, and then you're ready to go when it hits.
Yeah. There was a so I used to, when I was a more nascent business owner, I used to get kind of freak out if something went wrong, right? Get really embarrassed, think everybody cares, nobody cares. And then as I went farther along, again, I realized nobody cares, and that it's more important just to keep doing stuff. And so I have these podcasts, but then I'll do roundtables, I'll do live Q&A webinars with people, things like that. Brandon Lewis and I have one coming up in 2 days. And I'll send out emails through CRM before, like, hey, this thing's coming up. You've received those emails. And I sent one time. I think it was last year, maybe, in like April or May. And it was like, hey, have this thing coming up we'll just say May 10th, whatever, with this person. I forget exactly who it was with. Well, the email said that I have a webinar coming up January something with Jason Paris. Tune in. It's now end of April, right? In this example, that my dates are probably off, but it's like end of April. I'm sending an email to about 2,500 people with a subject line saying that I have a webinar coming up on January, whatever, and tune in to a webinar that happened 4 months ago. I realized the mistake I had made, which would have been like really mortifying for me quite a few years earlier than that. And I was like, cool, don't care. Just corrected it, sent it out, no explanation or anything. It was one of my most attended webinars everywhere, because they're probably like, why is Brandon like sending out all this crazy stuff? I think it got more
just makes
attention.
you human, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we all make mistakes, and I don't want to feel like I'm coming to your webinar and I can't make a mistake in what I say,
We
right? So it
only
makes
accept
you human
perfection.
that you've done it,
Yeah.
and we
I
can all
continue
just
to do it.
yeah, we will, right? You just got to own it and move on from it.
Yeah. There was again, I'm all over the map. Sarah, I like you. I like talking with you. So I just kind of going all over. But there's a guy I follow, Alex Hermosi. Not a lot of people know who he is, but he's big into marketing. So in the marketing world, people know him. And I went out to Las Vegas a few weeks ago, and did a workshop that his team, he runs a private equity company. I think they manage, oh goodness, like $500 million or something, like companies that do that kind of revenue. I mean, pretty substantial. And they were talking about Google Sheet empires and things like that, right? People tying all this stuff together with Google Sheets, and as opposed to using a holistic project management system.
Okay.
Right. So kind of hacking technology together on the back end, which is common for businesses as they grow.
Right.
And I got to talking with one of his executive team members. Turns out they still use a bunch of Google Sheets. It's like, while they're saying don't do this, they do it. And they run companies at $500 million. Like everybody has something.
Yeah. They're going to train others how to do it as they do it.
As they try to get there themselves.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Fair
Really
enough.
interesting. But
Yeah.
Sarah, is there anything else you want to add as we wrap up this episode?
No, Brandon, I think you've covered it. You've asked some good questions. I'm glad we had an opportunity to have this conversation. But as you mentioned at the beginning, I'm happy to chat with anybody. If they've got further questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Sarah, I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time to share your wisdom here. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thanks, Brandon. Take care.
If you want to learn more about the topics we discussed in this podcast and how you can use them to grow your painting business, visit paintermarketingpros.com/podcast for free training, as well as the ability to schedule a personalized strategy session for your painting company. Again, that URL is paintermarketingpros.com/podcast. Hey there, painting company owners. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give us your feedback. Let us know how we did. And also, if you're interested in taking your painting business to the next level, make sure you visit the Painter Marketing Pros website at paintermarketingpros.com to learn more about our services. You can also reach out to me directly by emailing me at brandon@paintermarketingpros.com, and I can give you personalized advice on growing your painting business. Until next time, keep growing.